Today's topic is Staphylococcus. So Staphylococcus is the gram-positive cocci which are found in grape-like clusters. The learning objectives of this lecture is that at the end of the session, the students will be able to describe the morphology of Staphylococcus, including its antigens, the classification of Staphylococci, can describe virulence factors. They can describe the clinical manifestations of the diseases caused by Staphylococci. They can decide the appropriate laboratory tests and interpret their results. And they can describe the resistance patterns of Staphylococci. The gram-positive cocci, if we classify, they can be classified into two families, the Micrococci and Streptococci. So they can be, these two families are differentiated by the catalase test. The Micrococci are catalase positive, gram-positive cocci, arranged in tetrads or clusters, while Streptococci are catalase negative, gram-positive cocci, arranged in pairs or chains. Family Micrococcus comprises of 4 genera: Micrococcus, Stomatococcus, Planococcus, and Staphylococcus. The Micrococcus species are skin commensals, usually not associated with human infections. They are 1 to 1.8 micron in size. They are arranged in tetrads. As they are obligate aerobes, they show oxidative pattern in oxidative fermentation test, that is Hugh and Lifson's test. The Planococcus and Stomatococcus again are not pathogenic to man. The Staphylococcus species are arranged in clusters. They show fermentative pattern in Hugh-Lifson oxidative fermentative tests. And among Staphylococcal species, Staphylococcus aureus is the most pathogenic. It produces an enzyme coagulase which forms the basis of coagulase test. Whereas other species do not produce coagulase and are called as coagulase negative Staphylococci or cons. They are rarely pathogenic to man, but they can cause the infections in immunocompromised individuals. Amongst the cons, the S. epidermidis is the most common one, which infects men, followed by S. saprophyticus, Staphylococcus lugdunensis, Staphylococcus schilferi, Haemolyticus, and Warneri. Historical aspects of Staphylococcus, if we see, in 1897, it was first observed in pus by von Recklinghausen. In 1880, Louis Pasteur first cultured Staphylococci in liquid medium. And they named it as Staphylococcus because they looked like a bunch of grapes, and in Greek, Staphyl means bunch of grapes, and kokos means berry. In general, features of Staphylococci, they are gram-positive cocci which are seen in grape-like clusters because the daughter cells of Staphylococci, they divide in different planes and remain attached to each other. They all are catalase positive. So we'll discuss the most important or medically important species of Staphylococcus, that is Staphylococcus aureus. It's a virulent organism. It has many virulence factors. Some of them are cell wall associated factors like peptidoglycan. As all gram-positive cocci, the Staphylococci have thick peptidoglycan layer in their cell wall, which provides rigidity to the bacterium, and it acts also as endotoxin. And the next one is the teichoic acid, which helps in adhesion of the bacteria to surfaces, and then again it inhibits opsonization. Then certain adhesin factors are there, known as cell surface adhesins, also known as clumping factor. They help in adhering of the bacteria and clumping. So this can be seen in a slide coagulase test. This clumping factor is responsible for the formation of clumps in this slide coagulase test. Then protein A, which is again a virulence factor. It acts as anti-complementary, chemotactic, mitogenic. It inhibits again opsonization, and it induces platelet damage, and it helps in coagulination. Coagulination is the phenomenon in which this protein A can bind to the Fc portion of any immunoglobulin G, and FAB portion remains free to bind to another antigen. So this coagulation can be seen in many diseases, or it can be used for diagnosis, for example in Salmonella typhi. Some strains of Staphylococcus aureus have capsule which inhibits phagocytosis. Some have the microcapsule also, which also helps in avoiding the phagocytosis, and the microcapsule has Zwitterian ionic properties. That is, it has both a negative and positive ion properties, which is very crucial for abscess formation. Now, certain toxins are also produced by Staphylococci. They are membrane-active toxins and epidermolytic toxin, enterotoxin, and toxic shock syndrome toxins. The membrane-active toxins are hemolysins, which lyse the RBCs. They can be of 4 types: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta hemolysins. Then leukocidins, which lyse the leukocytes. Leukocidins have 2 types of toxins: fast and slow toxin, that is F and S toxins. And when they combine with the gamma hemolysin, they cause hemolysis and leukocytosis. So, because of combination of the fast and slow toxins and gamma hemolysin, this property is increased. The hemolytic and leukocidal properties are increased. This is known as synergohymenotropy. So there are different combinations of N and S toxins with gamma hemolysis. So there are around 6 combinations can be made between the 2 toxins, and this hemolytic and leukocytic properties are demonstrated. Then next is the epidermolytic toxin, which is also known as staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome, which causes the disease known as staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome. Then enterotoxins are also produced by staphylococci. Most common one, the serotype which produces this enterotoxins is serotype A, and it is a super antigen also. The super antigen are those which stimulate the large number of different clones, antibody producing cells, and large amount of cytokines are produced. This enterotoxin causes the staphylococcal food poisoning, which is a self-limiting food poisoning, and incubation period is very short, around 1 to 6 hours, because of the preformed toxin present in the food. Okay, and this preformed toxin causes vagal stimulation, leading to nausea, vomiting, and sometimes diarrhea. Edit થશે. Another toxin is the toxic shock syndrome toxin, which is again a super antigen, and it causes different abscesses, osteomyelitis, post-surgical wound infection, associated risks in those patients which have abscess, osteomyelitis, and post-surgical wound infection. It can lead to toxic shock syndrome. So hemolysins can be of 4 types: the alpha hemolysis, beta, gamma, and delta. Alpha hemolysis is inactivated at 70 degrees centigrade and reactivated at 100 degrees centigrade. It has different lethal, leukocidal, thermonecrotic, cytotoxic, and neurotoxic properties. They can lyse rabbit RBCs, but they are not, or very less active against sheep and human RBCs. While The beta hemolysin is actually a sphingomyelinase. It can lyse sheep RBCs but not human or rabbit RBCs. It exhibits hot-cold phenomenon. Gamma hemolysis acts together with leukocidin for hemolytic activity, that is a synergiohymenotropic activity is shown. It lyses rabbit, sheep and human RBCs. The delta hemolysis has a surfactant action. It lyses rabbit, sheep, horse and human RBCs. It is again lethal, dermonecrotic and leukocidal. Then certain extracellular enzymes are also produced by Staphylococcus aureus. The first and most important one is the coagulase enzyme, which the coagulase reacting factor present in plasma. In the some species, then it will lead to activation of prothrombin enzyme. This prothrombin converts to the fibrinogen is converted into fibrin and leads to the coagulation of plasma. So it is demonstrated by tube coagulase test. Then heat stable thermonuclease, which is specific to S. aureus only. Then deoxyribonuclease or DNase enzyme is specific to Staph aureus. Other enzymes like lipases, proteases, staphylokinase or fibrinolysin, which dissolves the clot formation. Then hyaluronidase, which dissolves the connective tissue barriers. The pathogenic mechanism of staphylococcal diseases. Staphylococcus is a common colonizer. It colonizes anterior nares, axilla and perineal skin and many other sites in the body. When it gets introduced into the tissues either through minor abrasions or instrumentations, they adhere to tissues, and then with the help of their enzymes, they invade deeper into the tissues. Due to their different activities, they evade the host defense mechanisms by antiphagocytic activity of microcapsule and protein A, the inhibition of leukocyte migration. They survive intracellularly due to the formation of small colony variants. They can spread metastatically through hematogenous spread. Through the blood stream, they can spread to many other sites in the body. Clinical manifestations, the staphylococcal infections can range from minor soft tissue infections and skin infections, and it can range from these minor infections to life-threatening multi-system or multi-organ involvement systemic infections. So first, the skin and soft tissue infections involve folliculitis, that is infection of hair follicle, then furuncle, which is a boil kind of infection on the skin, then carbuncle, which is a painful lesion on the back of the neck, then impetigo, then the breast abscess and mastitis in lactating mothers. Then this is the commonest cause of surgical site wound infections. Then cellulitis, which here the picture is shown of the cellulitis. Then hidradenitis suppurativa, where the follicular infection of hair occurs recurrently in the areas where apocrine glands are in abundance, like axilla. Then botulomycosis, which is the mycetoma foot-like condition of the extremities, where a triad of the multiple discharging sinuses and the necrosis occurs, and the small granules will be formed in the pus. Then musculoskeletal infections like septic arthritis of different joints, most commonly the knee joint, the hip joints and phalangeal joints. Then osteomyelitis of long bones like femur, and then pyomyositis in HIV, the inflammation and infection of long muscles like sartorius muscles, and psoas abscess. Then epidural abscess occurs. In the respiratory tract infections, it is a common cause of ventilator-associated pneumonia in adults. Then septic pulmonary emboli can form. It is a common cause of post-viral pneumonia after like viral infections of childhood like measles. Then empyema pneumothorax. Pus occurs in the respiratory tract. Then pneumothorax. Then pneumatocoel, which is the shaggy, thin-walled cavities formed in the lungs. It is mostly found in neonates. Then bacteremia occurs due to secondary infection, due to the hematogenous spread. Bacteremia occurs and its complications arise, like sepsis and septic shock. Then central line associated bloodstream infection. Whenever there is, in the patient, central line is introduced, a catheter is introduced into the blood in the big vessels, then it can lead to an hospital-acquired bloodstream infection. Then metastatic involvement of kidneys, joint, bone, and lungs. Then it can lead to different types of all types of endocarditis, whether it is a native valve, the original or the natural valve endocarditis, or it can cause prosthetic valve endocarditis, where the natural valve has been replaced by the prosthetic valve, or the persons who are using intravenous drugs. In those patients also, the endocarditis is commonly seen due to Staphylococcus. Then it can cause urinary tract infections secondary to bacteremia. It's a common cause of UTI in sexually active young females. Then different infections associated with community-acquired MRSA, that we'll discuss later what is MRSA. So in those persons where infections is community-acquired caused by methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, here necrotizing pneumonia and purpura fulminans, where small purpuric spots are seen on the skin. The most common cause of purpura fulminans is the meningococci. And then necrotizing fasciitis, which again is most commonly caused by streptococci, but necrotizing fasciitis is also caused by the Staphylococcus. Then urinary tract infection, as I told you, then these are all non-toxin mediated illnesses. Then certain diseases of Staphylococci are caused by toxin mediated illnesses, like toxic shock syndrome due to the toxic shock antigen, which is a super antigen. Then food poisoning caused by enterotoxin, caused by mostly type A Staphylococci. Then staphylococcal skeletal syndrome, which is again a super antigen, and it causes the abrasion of the mucous membrane, abrasion of the skin, leading to the demonstration of naked skin. Superficial layers are removed and the naked skin is demonstrated. There is known as Nikolsky sign. Mucous membrane is rarely involved. Now the Staphylococcus gastroenteritis. This is a food poisoning caused by the enterotoxin produced by Staphylococci. Around 50% of Staph aureus strains produce enterotoxin. It is a preformed heat-stable toxin resistant to gastric juice. So in the food, it is preformed, and when the person ingests this food, where this preformed toxin is there, it is heat-stable, so it will survive cooking also and resistant to gastric juice. So it will not be destroyed by gastric juice in the stomach. The most common serotypes associated with staphylococcal gastroenteritis are A to E, G to I, R to T, and V. Out of these, type A is the most common one. The site of action of staphylococcal enterotoxin is the vagus nerve. So it stimulates the vagus nerve and the vomiting center, leading to the intense nausea and vomiting, and it also stimulates the intestinal peristaltic activity. Diarrhea is less common. Then sometimes fever occurs and hypotension occurs. So incubation period of staphylococcal gastroenteritis is very short. Rather, it is the shortest in all type of food poisoning. So incubation period is only 1 to 6 hours because the preformed toxin is ingested in the food. And the most common symptoms, as I told you, are the nausea, vomiting, occasionally diarrhea, hypotension and dehydration, no fever. It is a self-limiting food poisoning. Within 8 to 10 hours, the patient starts improving. The source of this food poisoning is a food handler. Secondary infections are usually not seen. The food items which are associated with staphylococcal food poisoning are mostly the milk products and bakery food, custards, potato salad, and processed meats. Another toxin-mediated illness is the staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome, which is also known as exfoliative or epidermolytic toxin. Two proteins, the epidermolytic toxin A and epidermotoxin B, are found. ETA is chromosomal and heat stable. ETB is the plasmid coded one and heat labile. This syndrome is more commonly found in newborns and children. Clinically, it may vary from localized tender blisters and bullae formation to exfoliation and separation of outer epidermal layer, leaving to denuded underlying skin known as Nikolsky's sign. In milder form, it is seen as pemphigus neonatum and bullous impetigo. In severe form in newborns, it is known as Ritter syndrome, where the newborn child shows fever, lethargy, irritability with poor feeding, and most of these strains belonging to staphylococcal scarlet skin syndrome are bacteriophage group 2. Now another toxin-mediated illness is toxic shock syndrome. It is caused, again, basically it is an enterotoxin, which is of F type. It is a super antigen. So, mostly toxic shock syndrome is seen in females which are using vaginal tampons during menstruation, or the patients already having abscesses, osteomyelitis, and post-surgical wound infection. The TSST producing strains, if they cause wound infection or they are found in vaginal tampons, this TSST is secreted by the staphylococci and it is absorbed into circulation and stimulates, because it is a super antigen, it stimulates non-specific T cells, again leading to excessive cytokine production and leading to multi-system disease. Clinically, the patient will be having fever, hypotension, mucosal hyperemia, vomiting, diarrhea, confusion, myalgia, abdominal pain, and erythematous rashes, leading to rapid involvement of liver, kidneys, GIT, or CNS. Diagnosis of toxic syndrome is by the detection of this toxin, TSST, by latex agglutination test or ELISA. Or we can directly detect the genes producing TSST1 and 2. These are known by PCR or polymerase chain reaction. The treatment of toxic syndrome is, the drug of choice is clindamycin. In case of methicillin sensitive Staph aureus, because the clindamycin is more preferred because it also inhibits the toxin production by this staphylococci. And if the strain is methicillin resistant, then the vancomycin can be used. Lab diagnosis of staphylococcal infections. The specimen collection will depend upon the site of involvement, where the site of infection is located. So if it's a suppurative lesion, we will collect the pus or wound swab. If it's a respiratory infection, we'll collect sputum. If it is a UTI, then midstream urine is preferred. Then if pyrexia of unknown origin or bacteremia, then blood. Food poisoning cases, then feces, vomitus, or food. And if a person is suspected to be a carrier, then nasal and perianal swabs are taken. First, after collection of sample, it is transferred to the lab as early as possible. After reaching the lab, first investigation to be done is microscopy. It is a gram-positive cocci, so easily we can see in the pus and different samples. We make a smear and stain the smear with gram staining, and we can see the gram-positive cocci in clusters. So this picture shows a gram stain smear where you can see the purple-colored clusters of cocci. These are all gram-positive cocci clusters, and these you can identify them as staphylococci morphologically. They are aerobic, facultative anaerobics, and non-fastidious. So, because they are non-fastidious, they can grow in basic culture media. So, on nutrient agar, Staph aureus will produce golden yellow colonies, as the name suggests. Staph aureus means golden yellow. So, it produces a golden yellow pigment. That's why the colonies appear as golden yellow on nutrient agar. On blood agar, they produce beta hemolytic colonies. And if so, after microscopy, we can do the culture of the samples on different culture media like nutrient agar, McConkey agar, liquid media, and selective media. On nutrient agar, as I told you, they produce golden yellow colonies. On McConkey agar, they produce small pink colored colonies due to lactose fermentation. On liquid media, they produce uniform turbidity. If we are collecting the sample where the different, which is commensals are present in the sample, like stool sample, then we have to use selective media. So selective media for Staphylococci are mannitol salt agar, where yellow colonies produced due to mannitol fermentation, or we can use salt milk agar, or Ludlam's medium, where Ludlam's medium which contains the lithium chloride and tellurite. Salt milk agar contains milk and high concentration of 6.5% concentration of salt, NaCl. Now, if then the bacteria grows in culture. After incubation, we can see the colonies of Staphylococci, and then we can pick up the colonies and identify the that this is Staphylococcus aureus through different biochemical tests. Like first and foremost is the coagulase test. It can be done through two types, tube coagulase and the slide coagulase or clumping factor. Then this is a list of tests which are found positive for Staphylococcus aureus while negative for cons, that is coagulase negative Staphylococci. So through these biochemical tests, we can differentiate between the Staphylococcus aureus and cons, that is coagulase negative Staphylococci. So these tests are coagulase test, heat stable thermonuclease test, DNA test, phosphatase test. But there is some exception where the S. epidermidis, which is a coagulase negative Staphylococci, also produces phosphatase. Then golden yellow pigmentation, hemolysis on blood agar, mannitol fermentation. This Staph aureus produces black colored colonies of potassium tellurite agar. Then it causes gelatin liquefaction and protein A detection. So all these tests can differentiate between the Staph aureus and other Staphylococci like cons. So first test is the tube coagulase test and slide coagulase test. So tube coagulase test is due to the coagulase enzyme, while slide coagulase shows the result due to clumping factor. The tube coagulase requires the coagulase reacting factor in plasma, while slide coagulase doesn't require CRF in the plasma. Tube coagulase is done in tube, while slide coagulase is done on slide. And tube coagulase, if positive, the clot will be seen, while in slide coagulase, clumps will be seen. In tube coagulase enzyme has 8 serotypes, where clumping factor has only 1 serotype. The S. lugdunensis also gives a positive result in slide coagulase, but it doesn't give positive test in tube coagulase. Both tube and slide coagulase positive test is shown in Staph aureus, Staph hiccus, and Staph intermedius. Okay. So for tube coagulase, we take 1 ml of plasma, and staphylococcal colonies are mixed or emulsified in this 1 ml of diluted plasma. The plasma should be diluted 1:6, and then in 1 ml of this diluted plasma, we emulsify the staphylococcal colonies, and then it is put into for incubation. After minimum 4 hours of incubation, we can examine the tube, and if there is the plasma doesn't move on tilting the test tube, it means there's a coagulase positive test. But if it is not seen in 4 hours, then we can extend the incubation up to 24 hours. So if after 24 hours also, if there is a coagulase, the coagulase or the clot formation, then also it is positive test. So this is the method of tube coagulase test. In slide coagulase test, what we do is we put a drop of normal saline on a clean slide. We emulsify the colonies of staphylococci in this, and then we add a drop of plasma, and coarse clumps will be formed. Then it shows that it is a positive coagulase, slide coagulase test. Now the typing of Staph aureus, it is used for the epidemiological purposes where there is an outbreak of food poisoning, then or any other disease of Staph aureus, then the typing is required. But for routine diagnosis, usually typing is not done. Typing of Staph aureus can be done through phenotypic methods, that is through the biochemical testing. Then it can be done by bacteriophage typing. Bacteriophages are the viruses which infect bacteria. So there are certain specific viruses which infect certain strains of Staph aureus. So according to the susceptibility of Staph aureus to different bacteriophages, the typing is done. Then antibiogram typing can be done. The different sensitivity to antibiotics are according to this result of antibiotic susceptibility testing. Antibiogram typing can be done of Staph aureus. Then we can do direct the genotypic methods where the genome of the Staph aureus is analyzed through either PCR or reference fragment length polymorphism, RFLP method. These are all typing methods of Staph aureus. Now another important thing about Staph aureus is that it readily develops drug resistance. So this drug resistance is important in case of staphylococcal infections. So the antimicrobial susceptibility testing is important to know which drug is effective in that particular strain which is causing the infection in the patient. So drug resistance in Staph aureus can be of two types due to the production of, one is the production of beta-lactamase enzyme. So beta-lactam antibiotics are commonly used for treatment of staphylococcal infections. But some of the strains, and these days large percentage of strains of Staph aureus show the production of beta-lactamase enzyme, which cleaves the beta-lactam ring of these antibiotics, and they become ineffective. So the staphylococcus becomes resistant to that beta-lactam drugs. Or another method of drug, or another mechanism of drug resistance is by alteration of penicillin binding protein, that is PBP. And this is seen in cases of MRSA, that is methicillin resistant Staph aureus. This is mediated by MAC-A gene. MAC-A gene is a chromosomal gene where this encodes for the conversion of penicillin binding protein to penicillin binding protein 2A. So due to the MAC-A gene present in some strains, this PBP, that is penicillin binding protein, converts into PBP2A. The penicillin binding protein is a crucial protein which helps in the cell wall synthesis of bacteria. So the beta-lactam drugs, they inhibit the PBP, leading to the inhibition of cell wall synthesis, leading to the death of the bacterium or killing of the bacterium. But when this MAC-A gene is present, it converts PBP to PBP2A. So it will not affected by the antibiotics. So it becomes resistant to all beta-lactam antibiotics. So the detection of MRSA is done by different methods, like disc diffusion test where the oxacillin or cefoxitin discs are used. Oxacillin can be used, and instead of oxacillin, cefoxitin disc can be used for detection of MRSA. Then oxacillin screening agar can be made by addition of screening to the agar and make a culture plate, and directly we can detect the MAC-A gene through PCR, that is polymerase chain reaction. Now, if the methicillin resistant Staph aureus is present, then it is a notifiable condition where you have to report to the clinicians, and drug resistance is seen nowadays very commonly. MRSA also are found to be increasingly common. The treatment of MRSA is because the beta-lactam drugs are no more effective in MRSA, so we do we give other drugs like vancomycin, which is the drug of choice for MRSA. Alternative drugs instead of vancomycin are teicoplanin, linezolid, daptomycin, and quinipristine, dalfopristin. Other non-beta-lactam, if sensitive, anti-susceptibility test. If antimicrobial susceptibility test shows that this particular staphylococcal strain is sensitive to other drugs also, then we can prescribe those drugs. But drug of choice is vancomycin. Nowadays, even vancomycin is found to be showing resistance by the bacteria. So some of the centers like Calcutta have reported to that some strains of Staph aureus are even resistant to vancomycin. It can be of two types, the vancomycin resistant Staph aureus and vancomycin intermediate Staph aureus. So if there are MRSA, then we have to take control measures in the hospital. We can recommend these control measures if MRSA strains are found to be isolated from the wards or from the hospitals. Then most important control measures are the proper hand washing. So hand washing properly in all the steps, 6 steps of hand washing if followed, then this is the most effective tool against infection control of any kind of infection in the hospital or in the community. So proper hand washing is the most effective tool to control hospital-acquired infections, MRSA infections, and community infections. Then another tool is the screening of MRSA carriers. So mostly MRSA carriers are the healthcare workers which have MRSA in their different sides of the body like nares, anterior nares or axilla and perineum. So we can do the periodical screening of MRSA carriers in the hospital, then and proper treatment of them. If they are found to be carriers, then proper treatment of that particular person should be done. Then stoppage of the antibiotic misuse. So judicious use of antibiotics. Whenever, if not required, the antibiotic should not be given, like in viral infections. Then, so the antibiotic misuse should be stopped. Then bundling. The bundling are a set of procedure or a set of steps which should be followed during any procedure done in the hospital, like the central catheter insertion. So all these steps should be followed. Then the hospital-acquired infection will not occur, or chances of that will be very less. So this was all about the coagulase positive staphylococci, that is Staphylococcus aureus. Sometimes the coagulase negative staphylococcus can also cause infections. Usually they are not pathogenic for men, but in some situation like in an immunocompromised state of the person, then these organisms also can cause infections. So they are mostly harmless commensals. They are less virulent than Staph aureus, but recently their role as pathogens is increasingly being reported. The important cons species are Staphylococcus epidermidis, Saprophyticus, Lugdunensis, and Schilferi. Staphylococcus epidermidis is the most common cons, around 75 to 80%. It is found in normal flora of the skin, oropharynx, and vagina. The risk usually as seen in those patients which have prosthetic devices, where their natural valve, etc. are replaced by the prosthetic devices. The chances of infections are more by this Staphylococcus epidermidis. Again, pathogenesis is similar. Initially they adhere to the surface, but on colonization they produce thick mucus-like structure which will produce a biofilm. So this biofilm is a thick layer of mucus or slime on the prosthetic devices. So this biofilm will be having a physical barrier and which will prevent the penetration of antibiotics to these microorganisms. So infections caused by epidermidis are prosthetic device-related infectious endocarditis with insertion of valvular prosthesis and ventricular shunt infections and stitch abscess. Other con is the Staph saprophyticus. It causes urinary tract infection in sexually active young women. Unlike other staphylococci, this saprophyticus is resistant to novobiosine. So by this property also we can differentiate with other staphylococci, and other lugdunensis and Schelferi. Again, they cause native valve related endocarditis and osteomyelitis. So that is all about the staphylococci. Now some MCQs we will discuss. So first one is, the question is, scalded skin syndrome is mediated by? The answer will be epidermolytic toxin D. Staphylococcus aureus causes vomiting in 6 to 8 hours. The mechanism of action is the vagal stimulation. That's why the predominantly vomiting is there. So answer will be B, vagal stimulation. The third question, a patient has prosthetic valve replacement and he develops endocarditis 8 months later. The most common cause will be the Staphylococcus epidermidis. C. Which hemolysin of S. aureus shows hot cold phenomenon? The gamma hemolysis. The answer is C. Which hemolysin of S. aureus is inactivated 70 degrees centigrade but again reactivated paradoxically 100 degrees centigrade? The alpha hemolysin. Coagulation reaction is, coagglutination reaction is mediated by which component of S. aureus? As I told you, the protein A, which helps in coagglutination test. S. aureus is differentiated with cons by all except coagulase test, DNase test, catalase test or protein A detection. The answer will be the protein A detection. Okay. Sorry, the answer will be catalase test, because the catalase is seen positive in all staphylococci. It is negative in streptococci. So the Staph aureus is differentiated from cons by all, like coagulase test, DNase test and protein A detection. But catalase test is not a differentiating test between S. aureus and cons. It is differentiating test between the staphylococci and streptococci. Because catalase test is positive in staphylococci, all staphylococci, and negative in streptococci. Which sugar fermentation test differentiate S. aureus from cons? The answer is mannitol. That's why it produces mannitol fermentation and seen as yellow colonies on mannitol salt agar. All of the above can be given for the treatment of MRSA except. So all these drugs, vancomycin, cotrimoxazole and linezolid, can be used for treatment of MRSA, but meropenem cannot be used. So answer will be the A, meropenem. Which is the least preferred antimicrobial for the treatment of methicillin sensitive S. aureus? So answer is D, the vancomycin, because it's a methicillin sensitive S. aureus. So there's no need to use MSSA. It is the drug of choice for MRSA. So MSSA, usually we don't give vancomycin. So you can see the answers. Thank you so much for patient listening.